80% of global trade is still under WTO rules.
No, 72%.
72%.
It was 80% pre-tariffs.
So that is, the United States is the world's biggest economy, but it is not actually such a big part of global trade. So that begs an important question, because the US has essentially said, we're not respecting global trade rules. Does that mean the rest of the world, if it would like to do what fight against protectionism, should go with the WTO, or should we think of free trade through regional trade deals?
Well, first, the U.S. has taken unilateral actions because it has a set of criticisms against the system and feels the system has not changed or evolved in the way it would have liked it to. And it's made some of those criticisms about unfair trading practices, about not level playing field in the world trading system. It's not the only one, by the way. Developing countries have also said that the world trading system is not working for them as well as they would like. And whilst you may not agree with the US's unilateral actions, I agree with a lot of their criticisms that we need to reform the system. But we don't need to speculate, because data shows what I'm telling you, that 72% of world trade is going on WTO terms, because other members have not done a tit-for-tat retaliation with the United States, which is good. We don't want to go to what happened in the 1930s with the Smoot-Hawley Act and tit-for-tat. So I want to give all thanks and congratulations to WTO members, because they are trading among themselves, they are respecting the rules, and so they are not going the way of moving away. Look, let me say that the 72% may yet come down. I'm not saying that, if there are further unilateral actions anywhere else, it might come down. But it's amazing that the system is so resilient.
It is. It is true that I think if 6 months ago we had spoken, I would have worried about a much bigger hit to the global trading system. I would have worried about a decline into 1930s style retaliation. And we haven't had that, because many countries, and in this region in particular, countries want freer trade. They do not want protectionism. But
can I say something, Zani? I have 166 members, okay? The United States trade to GDP ratio is 25%. So, it can live, it has a large economy, domestic demand is great, can live without trade. 142 of my 166 members have trade to GDP ratios north of 50%. So trade is existential for them.
But can you have a successful global trading system without the world's biggest economy actively taking part?
I think the U.S. is actively taking part. The U.S. is at the WTO. It's still a member. It engages at the WTO. And I think what we need to work with the U.S. on the reforms. And I think, look, this is where I see opportunity in this crisis, in global trade. So whilst we're sitting here, I think we shouldn't all be doom and gloom. There are parts of trade that are really growing. Services trade is growing at twice the rate, at about 4.3%. Goods trade is growing at 2.4% this year. Digitally delivered services trade is growing at 8%. So all of that green trade is almost 2 trillion. And I'm quite excited about that. What I think is we should listen to the criticisms, we should reform the system so we can take advantage of these new opportunities. And that's what we're working on at the WTO.
You raised a really important point. The WTO was created, in a sense, for a different world. It was a 20th century organization, and we are in a very dramatically changing world economy. Digital, services, AI. So what are the trade rules that we should all be pushing for to create an open system for the 21st century?
Well, I think we are working on rules for e-commerce, for digital trade. I think we should be paying attention for that. And a group of our members, almost 100 of them, at the WTO, you can make plurilateral rules by a group of willing coalition of members coming together, as well as multilateral, everybody involved. A plurilateral with almost 100 members looking at rules for digital trade is ongoing right now. And I think that's where we need to be focusing our attention. How are we preparing to take advantage of the opportunities that are coming up in trade?
So that's a really important point, that you need more agreements which are, as you say, plurilateral, coalitions of the willing, countries that want to have freer trade move together. Which areas are you most optimistic about having those significantly in the future?
Well, I think, as I said, coalitions of the willing that come together to look at digital trade, maybe green trade, which is growing. I just want to tell you something on AI. We really need to be up to snuff. We've just done a study on AI. Do you know that the first half of this year, trade grew at about almost 5%. That's why we're projecting 2.4 for the entire year. But guess what was driving that trade? Trade in products relevant to AI. Of course. 42% of the growth in trade in the first half of this year was driven by AI goods. So if we don't sit up and devise the rules that can make AI trade continue to grow the way it is, then we're losing time.
But what do you mean by that? Because AI is clearly, will be discussed hugely at this conference. It's the technology of our time. It's also a technology where there is a race. There is a race between the United States and China. And there is a concern, as you've written actually in articles, about developing countries falling behind. Given all of that, what are the rules you would want for trade in AI?
Well, let me say the good news is we already have an agreement that actually makes trade in AI flow. It's called the Information Technology Agreement, and it covers $3 trillion worth of trade in the semiconductors and computer equipment and all the things you need for AI. So that is good news. We're also, as I said, negotiating e-commerce. So we need to look at standards. We believe AI, one, will reduce the cost of trade, but will also change the nature of the goods we trade. And for that, you have to look at standards. And this is something that the WTO is very good at. And so we need to focus our attention on how do we think about standards in goods that are AI infused or services that are AI infused.
I hear you say that, and of course I agree. But then I think, where is the world's attention going to be? The world's attention is going to be on the meeting between President Trump and President Xi Jinping, because they are the two big economies that will set the rules. And I worry that you are pushing for useful things, but they are not where the center of the action is as regards global trading relationships.
Absolutely, I disagree with that completely, Zani. I mean, if we were not where the center of attention is, I don't think that China and the US will still be part of us at the WTO. They'll move. They don't need to be there. China's trade to GDP ratio is also less than 30%. But they're there, and you need to ask yourself why. So yes, it's also good to talk about AI and all that, but there's some parts of trade that are the plumbing of movement of goods and services in the world economy. And I think these two countries know it. China knows it, and the USA know it. But, I always joke that the WTO and its rules and agreements are like the plumbing in your house. You ignore it until the pipe breaks and floods the room.
That is a metaphor I don't want to think about too much.
Well, just think about it. You don't think about the plumbing in your house until the pipe breaks and your nice Persian rug is flooded and ruined. That's the way. WTO has fundamental rules like customs valuation agreement, intellectual property agreement. What I love about this place now is business people are in here. They are the ones that trade. You and I don't trade. So they know what matters to them. And so China, business people in China and business people in the United States, they are support at the WTO.
We do trade. I sell a product across borders, absolutely. Let's find out whether this audience believes that the global tariffs were a good or bad idea. Let's get the results of the poll, which I believe are ready. So they've come up. 20% of you think, oh, phew. Oh, luckily, they're all free traders here. That means 20% think the tariffs are a good idea. 80% of you think they're not. So we're starting, this is a friendly crowd.
It's because they're business people.
Absolutely.
You know, that's why I love being here. You know, they know what actually happens in trade. So they know what is good and what's not.
We just have 1 minute left. Given that you have a friendly business crowd here, and this is an action-focused event, things happen after this event. What is your wish list? What do you want these business people to go back and do and tell their governments needs to happen? If you could wave a wand, what do you need to strengthen global trade going forward?
I'll say two things to them. One, some optimism is warranted. Things are not broken the way people think. You know, just take away this number, 72% of global trade going on WTO terms. Two, but we need to reform the system. We cannot be complacent. So what I want you to do is to get your governments to support the reform at the WTO. We need to reform some of the ways we do business, like our consensus decision-making system, which is practiced as unanimity. Everyone has to agree, so it really slows down decision-making. We need to improve our transparency practices. For instance, we need to talk about the use of subsidies, whether they are new green subsidies or existing industrial subsidies. Industrial policy is back, so we need to talk about that. So there are lots of things we need to reform at the WTO. I want them to first bring their ideas for the reform. Some of them have been doing that. We just received the Kendaren from Japan, and they brought specific things they want to see in the reform. Bring your reform ideas and get your ministers of trade to have the political will to push for the reform March 2026 at the WTO Ministerial in Yaoundé. Thank you.
Bring your reform ideas, and the WTO is alive and kicking. Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, thank you very much.
Thank you, Zani.